Now, for other people, the depression hits at the end of the day. Everything starts winding down, you do everything you need to do, and suddenly you're just left alone with your thoughts. And now that the day is done, and you've got all this free time, all this time to think, that's when the bad thoughts creep in. That's where you start to regret your past and fear for the future. It's just this wave of negativity that comes as soon as your brain stops thinking about your day-to-day life. And that can make it so hard to go to sleep at night because your brain won't stop attacking you. Now, depending on your type of depression, there are two ways to get around that end-of-day depression. Sometimes your brain just physically needs time to process your day, okay? Sometimes you do just need to set aside time to sit and think and process and feel. And if you put it off until the very end of the day, every day, you're never gonna get to sleep because you waited until the last moment to deal with yourself, and now you're paying for it by dealing with it when you're trying to sleep. And if that's the case, set aside time before bed to just sit and think and wallow and feel. Don't wait until the very end of the day to feel. As soon as you come home and you finish what you need to finish, just sit down, lay in bed, sit on the couch, sit in a chair, whatever, put on some music and just think. Put your mind to work, let your brain race, let it process those emotions, let it process those doubts, those fears, those anxieties, those bad memories. Process it. Give yourself an hour. Maybe you only need 30 minutes, maybe you need 2 hours, whatever amount of time it takes to process the day. Do that before bed. That way, when it finally does come time to go to sleep, you'll already have dealt with that. Don't procrastinate on self-care. The longer you procrastinate on self-care, the more you're going to suffer for it. But for other people, that end-of-the-day depression doesn't come because there's things you haven't processed. It's just that your mind has a constant, persistent influx of bad thoughts that you can't turn off. No amount of processing makes it go away. It is a persistent feeling. And if there's no amount of processing that's going to make that go away, what you need to do is find a way to clear your mind. I know it sounds corny to say meditate. I know everybody tells you to meditate, and it sounds stupid, it sounds corny, it doesn't sound like it's going to help. But you don't have to sit crisscross applesauce, do the finger hand signs, and go Om. All meditation really means is that you clear your head. And if you can't figure out how to clear your head, focus on breathing. Okay? Focus on something other than your thoughts that isn't very intensive. Just anything that you can focus on that's not your thoughts, that's very, very low mental effort. And by focusing on your breathing and taking deep breaths, a lot of the times you can force yourself to not think long enough to just pass out and fall asleep. The goal here is less to process your emotions and just focus on something really boring until your brain gets so bored it falls asleep. And if you have a hard time doing that on your own, focusing on something really boring that makes you fall asleep, turn on a documentary about something that you do not care about, something mind-numbingly boring, and try and watch it. Make an active effort to pay attention. But make sure that this is a documentary or something that you could not care less about, something extremely boring, because that's just like falling asleep in class when the lecture is boring. Except this time, instead of missing out on an important lecture, you're missing out on absolutely nothing important. So if you can't go to sleep at night, but you pass out during class, then put class at the end of your day. Just get really bored. Now, sometimes depression isn't based on trauma, and it's not based on the time of day. It's just this general feeling of loneliness, like a lack of connection. So if you struggle with feeling that there's nobody who cares, or just this lack of connection, or you just don't socialize enough, what I would do is get a hobby that's very, very low intensity, but still puts you in a position where people talk to you. Even if they're not talking to you about you and your problems, just the fact that they're talking to you about the thing can help. And it really doesn't matter if this is a hobby that you're actually passionate about. Because a lot of the times when you're depressed, you're not passionate about anything at all. And that's kind of the whole problem, is that you've lost all of your joy. But here's the thing, even if you're not passionate about something, if you can go to a place and do things with other people, it's going to give you something to talk about other than what's going on in your own head, and it's going to give them a reason to talk to you. And even if you do not care what they're talking about, they're still talking to you. They're actively going out of their way to talk to you because you're both participating in the same hobby. I cannot tell you to fake being happy, but I can tell you to fake interest in a hobby as a sort of cheat code to get people to talk to you. And one thing I noticed about forcing yourself to pretend to care about a hobby is that very, very often, not for everyone, but very often, the fact that this hobby becomes the only place where people will talk to you, and the only place where you get positive reinforcement because you're participating in this hobby, it has this weird psychological effect where you start to look forward to that hobby because it's the only place in your life where you get that positive reinforcement. And that's why what the hobby is doesn't really matter, because what matters is getting any kind of communication and positive reinforcement. Because here's the thing, here's the secret. Anything can be fun if you're doing it with good people. You could be watching the worst movie ever made, but if you're watching it with your friends and your friends are making fun of the movie, suddenly this god-awful movie is the funniest thing you've ever watched because you're doing it with your friends. And here's the thing, at the end of the day when it comes to depression, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Actively doing something will always be better than doing nothing. Simply wallowing in your own misery is never the solution. Even if whatever strategy you're thinking about trying you don't think will work, even if the strategy seems stupid or cringe or boring or whatever, it almost doesn't matter. What matters is that you are taking control of your life and actively doing something. And if you actively do something and it does not work, that doesn't mean stop doing things, it means do something else. Whatever you choose to do something and take ownership of it. Take control of your own life. Anything in your life that you can exert control over, do so. It's going to make you feel so much more powerful when you can exert power over your own life. Give yourself agency. Give yourself things to do that require you to invest energy and require you to make decisions, and then force yourself to care about the outcomes of those decisions. If it feels like nothing matters, you gotta find something that does. And sometimes finding something that matters is a conscious choice. But just because you chose to take something seriously and chose to exert control and make decisions and be active in something doesn't mean it's less valid. Because here's the thing, that spark of inspiration, that spark of motivation, sometimes that doesn't come naturally. Sometimes you have to make the decision to choose to care. So whatever you choose to do, try to do something low intensity so it doesn't drain you of all of your energy. Do something that requires you to make decisions. Force yourself to care about those decisions. And pick something that affects other people who are going to give you positive feedback and positive reinforcement. And if you do that, if you choose to care and you get that positive reinforcement, eventually things will get better. Eventually, you're gonna feel like you have control over some small aspect of your life. There are no wrong answers in this situation except for giving up. Because if you give up all hope, then very quickly you start to wonder why you even bother continuing living. And that's a dangerous rabbit hole to go down. And that's a rabbit hole that a lot of people don't come back from. At the end of the day, your pain is real. It does not make you less of a person because you struggle more than most people. But there is something that you can do about it, and it doesn't matter what you do, just do something. That's all I have to say. I hope something I said helped. And always know that your older brother is always here to talk to you. Whatever you choose to do, I support you.